What is going on, everyone? Today I'm going to be giving you a spoiler-free review for The Flash. So I will be doing a review full of spoilers probably tomorrow, and we're going to go more in depth with the movie because there is a lot to talk about with it. But for today, we're just going to go through the non-spoiler section of my review with the positives, the negatives, and then of course at the end we're going to give it a rating out of 10. This is a film I've been anticipating for quite some time. It's been in pre-production for a long time, and obviously amidst all the controversy with Ezra Miller, a lot of people got less interested in the movie, and then also with the DC universe, being reset after this movie, it just, a lot of people just started losing their interest, and I never lost my interest. I was always anticipating this. It's been up there as one of my most anticipated movies for the past couple years, and now we finally got to see it, and did it live up to those expectations? Well, let's talk about it. So starting off with the positives, the first thing I want to say is this is a crowd-pleasing, fun experience all around. Like, it's definitely going to be a movie that could really work for anyone, which is why I'm expecting it to get really good reviews all around. Because you might not enjoy certain aspects of it, you might actually hate certain aspects of it, but I don't think it's very possible for someone to go into this movie and just absolutely hate their time watching it. I feel like it's very likely you're gonna at least have a fun time, if none else. If you think it's terrible, you'll probably still walk out of the theater saying, that was a fun 2.5 hours. And at the end of the day, that is what movies are meant for, entertainment. So if you're gonna get something out of it, it should be at least fun. And it is just that. There's never a dull moment, there's never a boring moment, there's never a moment that I feel like doesn't need to be in the movie. So much so to the point where I was looking for a time to go to the bathroom, and I physically could not find a time to do it because every moment's just non-stop, something important, either important dialogue or just a really cool action scene, something that you need to be there for. And it's a 2.5 hour movie, so for a movie to keep that up for that long is pretty impressive in my opinion. The first act of this movie definitely is the strong suit for a lot of people, I would say, but honestly I think the second act has some of the strongest stuff in this entire film. The third act is kind of half and half, where there's like half really great stuff and then half not so great stuff, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But those first two acts especially are really strong stuff. I mean, not just the action scenes, but you have a lot of great dialogue between certain characters. And I think some of the best scenes, surprisingly, are between the two Barrys in this movie. So of course, that's not a spoiler. In the trailers, they show this. When Barry goes back in time, he does come across his past self, and it's like a 10 years younger self. And their interactions, most of it's comedic, most of it, I will say. Do they overdo the comedy a little bit? Maybe, but at the end of the day, the Flash has always been a very funny character, at least in the DC extended universe. So I don't think it's out of place to have there be a lot of comedy there. And it's not like it's bad comedy. I think a lot of the comedy genuinely was very funny, which is definitely another positive to say for this movie. There's a lot of laugh out loud moments that I genuinely laughed a lot at. So that's good, if none else. And there's scenes, there's even some serious moments where they talk, and it really means a lot because there's this, of course, backstory here where his mom died, and that is pretty much the whole premise of the movie. He's trying to go back in time to save his mom, and because this version of him got to keep his mother and he wasn't, he has this feeling of like envy towards him. And I think it makes for a lot of interesting scenes, a lot of interesting dialogue, and the themes of trying to let go of like what's meant to be and how you sometimes can't, fix everything. Like, those themes actually work really well in this movie. And yeah, it's something that is done frequently in a lot of superhero movies, but I think it works really well here in pretty much all aspects. There's also a lot of themes of mental health here, which I think is kind of ironic given everything that's happening with Ezra Miller. And there's even some scenes which I personally feel like they wrote in after the controversy or like did some sort of reshoot, because there's no way they coincidentally had some of these scenes coincide with what was happening with Ezra Miller in real life. Like, it's actually kind of crazy. Like, they were genuinely making jokes of it. It might have been a coincidence because at the same time, I don't think that would be in good taste for them to make jokes of what was happening there. But if you've seen the movie, you probably know what I'm talking about. Like, it genuinely feels like it's a metaphor for what's happening. It's crazy. I don't know. I probably was a coincidence, but to me, it just kind of felt like it connected to that situation. Ben Affleck's Batman is great in this. He's not in that much of it, but when he is in it, I'm loving it. He's definitely one of my favorite Batmans. I know a lot of people don't share that opinion because some of the movies he's been in have had some issues with them, especially like, you know, the 2017 Justice League. But if you look at like Batman v Superman, which I personally really enjoy, and the Snyder Cut, he is solid in both of those movies, and he is pretty great here. I do wish he was in more of it though, I really do, but at the end of the day, he's not really the star of the movie. Star of the movie, other than of course Barry Allen, is definitely Michael Keaton as Batman or Bruce Wayne. He has probably the most stuff in this movie, other than of course the Barrys, that I really enjoyed. And I honestly want to go as far as to say I think they respect the character almost more than they did for Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man in No Way Home. And I say that very carefully because I love No Way Home. It was incredible. Absolutely loved the, you know, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield being in that. But at the same time, I feel like they just kind of felt like they were in there. They had their little moments, that great moments, don't get me wrong. Andrew Garfield had, I think, better moments, even better than Tobey Maguire. But Tobey Maguire, like, there wasn't that much they did with him, other than, like, you know, a couple of those moments at the end there. I loved that stuff, absolutely adored it, but I don't feel like it respected that character as much as I feel like they do for Michael Keaton's Batman. And obviously, Michael Keaton's Batman, he's only had 2 films, and they're very old at this point. Not very old, but they're relatively old. You know, obviously a lot of people who, you would have to be, what, like 30 something to be alive when those came out. So like anyone in their 20s, like they weren't even alive when those movies came out, right? So they might not have that nostalgia for it. I personally don't have like great nostalgia for it because I saw them for the first time a few years ago, the Michael Keaton Batman movies. But I did play the Batman Lego game back in the day, and you know, it had the same music, so you were still able to feel those emotions watching that. I did watch Batman and Robin when I was younger as well, so you just kind of get in that old Batman feel, and I do think they respect the character. They don't do a crazy amount of things with him, but there's a lot of great action scenes. There's a couple of great scenes with dialogue, and even some moments that I do feel like develop his character and give decent closure to his character. Like, I don't really feel like Batman Returns did. I mean, unless you count, you know, Batman and Robin as like connected to that, as well as Batman Forever, which they kind of technically are, but most people just consider it its own thing. But this really does feel like closure for Michael Keaton's Batman more than anything. Like, I feel like they definitely could do more stuff with Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Mans, but this felt like closure for Michael Keaton. He's never coming back, hopefully. Like, as much as, you know, I love him in this movie, I don't want to see him again. This is a great end for his character, and it felt like closure. It felt like it just, you know, resolved everything, and I loved that. I think he was the highlight of the movie. Supergirl in this movie was actually pretty great. She wasn't the best thing ever, though. Like, I wasn't like, oh my god, she's outstanding. She had a couple of cool action scenes, and that's really all I can say about her. I didn't connect with the character all that much. They don't really do much with the character. It just kind of feels like Supergirl, cool. That's it. Like, there's not much to her, to be honest. That's not a, you know, diss at the actress. She did a great job with the role, but they don't really give her that much in the story. She's just kind of there to fight Zod, and that's pretty much it. As I said before, the comedy was genuinely pretty good in this movie, and a lot of the comedy was not necessarily like jokes. Like, it doesn't feel like MCU humor as much. Some of it does, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it felt like just funny sequences that were like these just really elaborate scenes that just make you laugh just based on how crazy and outlandish it is. And you probably know what I'm talking about. There's a scene in the first act that was like that. It was a slow-mo scene, which I thought was really cool. It might sound hypocritical that I'm like praising humor in a movie because I'm always talking about, oh, I want less humor in my Marvel superhero movies and all that, but there's certain movies where humor works and there's certain movies where it doesn't, and there's certain times where you can use humor and it helps things, and there's certain times where it ruins scenes. And I think Guardians Volume 3 was a great example of a movie that used humor correctly. They used it at the right points. They knew when to use it. It was funny, and it did not ruin the emotional moments. And I think The Flash did the exact same thing. They had great humor. It did not ruin the emotional moments because there were emotional moments. There was one scene that was honestly a tearjerker scene. They did not let humor ruin it whatsoever. They did not stick a single joke in that scene. They let the humor roll. And they do that for a lot of, or they let, not the, They don't let the humor roll, they let the emotions roll. And there's a ton of other scenes like that in this movie, but then the humor stuff is really funny. It's a great balance between them, and I'm very, very pleased to say it does not fumble the bag when it comes to that. And the last thing I'm gonna say for the positives, the soundtrack is so goddamn good. It is one of my favorite soundtracks for a superhero film in a while. And the reason I feel like that's the case is, first of all, the Flash theme is just awesome. But the composer, his name is, I think, Benjamin Wallfish. I've never heard of him before, but he respects the OG themes from the Michael Keaton Batman movies with, you know, Danny Elfman's themes. He respects them and he uses them throughout the whole movie. And like I said, I'm gonna diss No Way Home again. I'm sorry, I love No Way Home. I loved it even more than this movie. But Michael Giacchino, which I do love as a composer, he did not do enough of respecting the OG themes. He would use maybe like 2 seconds of them here and there, but this respected the hell out of Danny Elfman's music. You heard that Batman theme all throughout the movie, again and again and again, and it hit every single time they had it. It brought me back to the Lego Batman video game I used to play in 2008, and it was amazing. Now let's get into the negatives, and I only have honestly like 3 things to say. But the first negative, which is kind of like a mixed slash negative, I don't really think it affected the film that much, but I think there's just a lot of missed opportunities with it, I guess is the best way to say it. So this has to do with the cameos. Now, I'm sure if you're on Twitter, you probably already got spoiled for it, or, you know, you haven't, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but there are certain things that appear in this movie that are not in the trailers, that are surprises, and they are kind of, I don't really know. Like, they're just kind of like, eh. There are people who are trying to act like it ruins the movie, and I think that's just mind-boggling because it's not the purpose of the movie. The cameos are not the purpose of the movie. You don't go to the movie to see cool cameos, and if you're doing that, then you're probably not, you're just not doing it right. I don't know. You should be watching the movie for the movie, not for the cameos. But because this is a multiverse film and we keep getting these multiverse films, they need to do more stuff with the multiverse, I feel like. So I wouldn't mind if they actually found a way to incorporate more of the other universes and really just make things go crazy. And because this movie is essentially like, it's resetting the universe, right? It's restarting everything. They need to find, or they should have found a way to just do some crazy shit to just end off all the OG, like the original DC stuff from the past, but they kind of don't for a lot of them. I feel like there's certain ones that obviously Michael Keaton, I feel like, gets his closure, but some of the other ones, you could have just done something with them, and I feel like they just really didn't, you know what I mean? So without spoiling anything, that's just kind of all I'm going to say. I'll talk more about it in my spoiler review, but I feel like there's just a lot of missed opportunities there, and that's all I'm going to say. And the next thing people are complaining about a lot, which I'm going to put in the negatives as well because I do think it was an issue for some scenes, but people completely over-exaggerate this, and they were over-exaggerating before it even came out, and that's the CGI. Yes, there are some scenes where it could be a problem, but for the most part, it's not. And don't go, you know, basing your opinion on the CGI off of clips on Twitter, because I saw clips on Twitter. It looks 1,000 times worse than it does on the big screen in the theaters. It does not look good when you're watching it on a Twitter video, obviously. But when you're watching it on screen, it looks pretty great for most of the movie. There are some scenes like that maybe has a wonky scene where it looks a little off, but it usually doesn't last for more than a couple consecutive seconds, and then it goes away and it's normal again, you know? Most of the CGI looks great. Some of it is like, not that the CGI is bad, it's really great. It's just they use CGI in places where I feel like they don't have to, and I think that's more of my negative. It's not really that the CGI is bad, because honestly, I don't think it is. I think it's fine. I think people over-exaggerate it. I just think there's certain things where I question why they even use CGI for that. Like, there'll just be a scene where Barry's just in his suit, just chilling around, and you can tell it's CGI. And I'm like, why did they even CGI that? They couldn't just make a practical suit and have him wear that? Like, why did they need to CGI that? And there's certain things later in the movie as well where it's like, just why couldn't that just have been there in the flesh? Why do you need to CGI that? I don't really complain about CGI as much as most people do. I really don't think it affects the movie that much. If it could have been the worst CGI I've ever seen, if the movie has a great story, it's really entertaining, I don't really give a shit. I really don't. I'm not watching these movies to get to experience the next generation of technology. Like, I just want a good story with great characters, with great action, that matters more to me. And if the choreography's on point, then I'm okay with a couple scenes looking a little like maybe like it's a PS4 video game. People are calling it like PS2 graphics. That's some bullshit. PS2 game looking like that would have been fucking insane. But no, it looks more like maybe like PS4, maybe even PS5. It looks like a video game. I think that's a better way to put it. Some scenes look like a video game, but not like an old video game. It looks more like a modern video game, which modern video games look pretty great. The next negative I'm gonna have is the character of Zod. Zod was hyped up a lot in the trailers, and Michael Shannon, the actor who plays Zod, he recently said in an interview, he's like, he kind of regrets doing this movie, like he doesn't enjoy what they did with it. And I was questioning that. I was like, that's kind of crazy to say before the movie comes out. But watching the movie, I kind of get what he's saying in terms of his own characterization, because they don't do squat with him. Like, he's not there as a character. He's not really a character in this movie. That's probably the best way I can say it, to be honest. He's just there to be the person they fight, I guess. He's not a character. He's a character in Man of Steel. He's not a character in this movie. So if you were hoping to get some great, insane scenes with him in terms of like characterization and stuff, you're not going to get that. You know, obviously Spider-Man No Way Home, which I keep comparing it to this movie, that movie obviously has this movie beat in terms of the villains, because you did actually have good characterization with some characters like, you know, Green Goblin and even some ways Electro and Dr. Octopus. But I think you can probably compare Zod to someone like Sandman or Lizard, honestly, from No Way Home. Like, he's more compared to them because that's how he felt. He felt like just a villain to fight, just a villain to fight in the scenes, and that's it. He doesn't have much dialogue. He doesn't have much to do. He's just kind of that. And the main villain here really isn't Zod, to be completely honest. The main villain is, in some ways, himself. Barry himself, like just in terms of like mentally speaking. And is that more interesting than having a really cool villain? Maybe, but I feel like they could have at least tried to do something with Zod that was a little bit more, I don't know. It wasn't a big deal, but it was a little odd. And the last thing I want to say is there are some plot holes to the movie, some logical flaws, and this one I'm gonna really kind of put like air quotes in, because I don't really know if I felt like it was that big of a deal for some of them. Like, some of them were very minuscule, and some of them I could just be stupid and I could just be wrong. Like, I feel like people are so fast to judge plot holes, but it could just be me missing something and then just not understanding fully what happened. But there's a couple scenes like that where I felt like it was just either not explained, or I just didn't understand how that was possible, like even just in terms of logic, like physically. But it didn't ruin my experience. I just kind of forgot about it and said, okay, let me just assume they explain that. I don't know. Let me assume there's some explanation to it, but it could still be a plot hole in some instances. So I think I have to at least mention it. And a lot of that messy stuff does come from the third act. So I was saying before, the third act has a lot of messy things to it, and I do think some of the logic is where that kind of comes into play. So yeah, that's that. That's my review. Those are my positives and negatives. Let's get into a rating. This is not an easy movie to rate whatsoever. I'm gonna be honest. Like, this is a movie I could expect could change very easily depending on my rewatch. But for now, I'm gonna give it a confident 8.8 out of 10. I definitely could see that raising. I definitely can see that going higher. But for now, I think an 8.8 is good. I think that sounds all right. I enjoyed this quite a bit. I thought it was solid. And I think it has potential to be within my top 10 favorite movies of the year if it stays its course. It depends how many more movies I see this year. It really depends. But I think it has potential. It was solid. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. If you haven't seen it, let me know, are you going to see it? And don't forget to check out my spoiler review, which I will be doing in the next coming days. I will see you all in my next one. Peace out.